Here you have this book of Deuteronomy, which is really a book of laws. Laws that are handed forth by Moses. I think you say that Moses is the speaker in Deuteronomy. And so let's talk for a little bit about these laws. There are a lot of them. A lot of Christians are familiar.
240.
240. Now, Christians, of course, familiar with the Ten Commandments, a sort of distillation of laws. But for a lot of Christians, the idea of having these innumerable laws, and some of them of considerable minutia or detail, at least seemingly so. Talk about why you have these laws. Why are they regulating things at such an intricate level? What's the point of it?
Well, this could be a very long answer. I'll try to keep it brief. First, I think your viewers need to know something that I did not know. I learned it after the publication. The book that the founders of the United States most quoted, secular or religious, is Deuteronomy. The book that Jesus cites the most outside of Psalms is Deuteronomy. People don't know this. They don't know. It's the fifth of the 5 books of the Torah. The Torah is the foundational document of the Old and New Testaments. Love God, love your neighbor, the 10 Commandments, the Exodus, the creation, Garden of Eden. It is all there. My view is that the problem in our society and in the West is secularism. Secularism is a dead end. Secularism leads ultimately to the collapse of civilization, which is exactly what we are seeing now. We have been living off the fumes of Deuteronomy, if you will, and Exodus and Genesis and so on. We have been living off their fumes for the last few generations. The fumes have now withered away, and now men give birth. The chaos in which we are living today is the direct result of secularism, and I have a proof. The most foolish institution in our society is the university, and it is the most secular institution in our society. There are no secular institutions with wisdom. There are a handful of secular people with wisdom. There are no secular institutions. The only antidote to the crisis the West is in is to reacquaint ourselves and take this book called the Bible seriously. I've been working 10 years after teaching 40 years. I know biblical Hebrew like English, thank God. It was a gift to me, as it were, and then I developed it. And I'm trying to make it relevant. There is a law in Deuteronomy. Talk about laws. I'll give you one example. I'll give you as many as you want. We don't have a lot of time, I know, but here's a beauty. You cannot favor the poor in a courtroom. It is a law against social justice. The Bible is only interested in justice. The left is interested, the anti-Bible world is interested in social justice. Just that alone is worth, as it were, the price of the book. You can't favor the poor man in judgment is the antidote to social justice. Social justice, that means you do favor the poor guy, and justice says you do what is right.
Amazing. The one and only Dennis Prager. DennisPrager.com is the website, the new book, the one we're talking about, The Rational Bible, Deuteronomy. Dennis, you talk about in this book a concept that is often translated as revering God or respecting God. But you say, let's get down to it. The actual meaning of the biblical passage is fearing God. But it appears like there's something about our modern sensibility that recoils from the concept of fearing God. God is supposed to be, God loves us, we love God. You're not supposed to fear something that you love. You say that the fear of God is in some ways the beginning of wisdom, and explain why that is.
Well, that quote is from the Bible, that wisdom begins with the fear of God. Look, the human being fears. We're born with fears. There's no way to eliminate fear in the human psyche, condition, and heart. So the question is not whether you will fear, it is what you will fear or whom you will fear. There is a great story. I want to just make clear, this is the third of my 5-volume commentary. Genesis and Exodus have been published. I didn't obviously go in order because this is the 5th book, but this is the third of my 5 volumes. In Exodus, there is a great story. The Pharaoh, who was a demigod, half man, orders midwives to kill Hebrew babies that are born, Hebrew male babies, to drown them in the Nile. They didn't. They disobeyed Pharaoh. It's like disobeying Stalin or Hitler. They disobeyed him, and it says why. The hesitation is because I'm translating from the Hebrew. The midwives feared God. If you fear God, it is liberating. Then you don't fear man. It is psychologically and morally indispensable to a good life, to a healthy life, to fear God. My claim is that during COVID, more churches and synagogues feared the CDC and the New York Times than they feared God. That is how powerful the notion is of fearing God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who died, the Christian pastor in Germany, who died because he resisted Hitler and the Nazis, he feared God more than Hitler. Most Christians in Germany feared Hitler more than God. This is not even an indictment. This is a description. By the way, this will blow your mind, Dinesh. There is one other being we are told to fear in the Bible: our parents. So here's an interesting little anecdote. I once asked on my radio show, if you didn't take drugs when you were young, when you were in high school, why didn't you? Virtually every person who called in said, because my mother would kill me.
That's fascinating. And when I think about my own parents, I mean, I think I did have a kind of, you could almost call it a holy fear of them. A little bit of a holy fear. And interestingly, that holy fear did not dispel or even dilute my affection from them. I knew that their decisions were ultimately in my interest. And I guess I knew a little bit that a part of me had inclinations that went against my own long-term self-interest. And so I was counting on my parents to be kind of the enforcers of my own long-term self-interest. And I think, the Bible, of course, equates God with being our father. So it's interesting that this analogy holds both at the level of our own parents and
people will notice what the left, which is the antithesis of biblical wisdom, what the left is doing more than anything else is undermining parental authority. Every cult, every totalitarian movement begins with the removal of parental authority.
I mean, if you look also at, and you know this as well as anyone, the themes of our novels and our sitcoms, it's always that the parents are really stupid. And the young people always know what's really going on. And the audience is encouraged to identify with the rebellion against the parents. Now, one of the themes that you focus on is not merely parental authority, but I think an equally critical one, the distinction between the sexes and the different roles that those imply. There is a line in Deuteronomy, quote, "Neither sex may wear the clothing of the other sex." What does that mean today?
Well, it's clear. The Bible, the biblical theology rests upon distinctions. God does not create for 6 days. He creates the first day, then he creates animals, and he creates humans. Otherwise, the word create is never used. What God does for 6 days is make distinctions between light and dark, between dry land and sea, between good and evil, between man and woman, between man and God, between the holy and the profane. This is the biblical outlook of life. It rests on distinctions. The left is destroying all distinctions. The most remarkable is male-female, which of course is essential to Genesis. And again, back to Deuteronomy, you can't wear the clothing of the other sex. Men can't walk around in women's clothing. And when you end biblical wisdom, you end up with men give birth, men menstruate. Virgin Air and British Airways, excuse me, have just announced that male pilots can wear women's clothing, and of course the flight attendants as well. This is what secularism ultimately leads to. Dinesh, I have said all of my 40 years of broadcasting, I have had one overwhelming theme to everything I have said. the consequences of secularism. We all know the consequences of too much religion, but nobody talks about the consequences of too much secularism. And ultimately, you are now seeing it. 500,000 young Americans say that they are the other sex. This is what it leads to. So Deuteronomy could not be more relevant.
Well, I got to say that this is a book that that if you almost randomly open it and start reading it, there are gems that sort of jump out at you on every page. I mean, the book itself, I think, demands careful attention and study over a period of time because there's so much in it, and it's part of a series. So this is really, would you say in some ways, Dennis, we'll close on this, is this the kind of crowning accomplishment of your work? Because this is something that is an incredible intellectual endeavor, and yet you present it in a way that is digestible and accessible to people.
Well, with regard to the last point, this is my motto. I work hard so that the reader doesn't.
Yeah.
I spend most of my time rewriting and rewriting and rewriting so that it is so clear. That a peasant in China who never heard of Moses will understand what I'm saying. That is my magical reader. My imaginary reader is a peasant in China. Because I believe that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, can change anybody's life for the better, whether it is a Jew, a Christian, an atheist, or a peasant in China.
I mean, you have an opening section where you go to Jewish readers, to Christian readers, to non-religious readers, and it occurred to me, well, that pretty much covers everybody.
Yeah.
So this is a book that is not a book that is kind of insular, but one that is put out there for the widest possible audience.
Well, I have a motto that when I began teaching the Torah at a Jewish seminary, and I saw that half my class were not Jewish, and it made sense to me. I used to say to them, the Torah is as much only for the Jews as Beethoven is only for Germans.
That's perfectly put. Thanks very much, Dennis. Really appreciate your comment on the podcast.
It's an honor. Thanks.